الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا مولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. In last week's Majlis, one of the points that had been raised was with regards to the importance of ilm and zikr, especially ilm along with tasawwuf, and had mentioned the malfuzat of Hazrat Ilyas rahmatullah alayh, who mentions, and this is with regards to the work of tabligh, he mentions in his malfuzat that ilm and zikr are the two wings of this effort. And truly, ilm and zikr are two very important aspects of any person's life. Not just the work of tabligh, but any endeavor that a person undertakes, whether it is the path of struc and tasawwuf, or whether it is because without ilm and without knowledge, without ilm, a person's suluk and tasawwuf can become a means of misguidance for a person's tabligh, person's efforts, to the extent that the form in the manner in which a person does ibadat. This can also lead a person towards being misguided. And one example that I given last week was with regards to ikhlas, for instance. A person does the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but doesn't know what ikhlas is, the importance of ikhlas, due to which whatever a person does goes in vain. And this is when a person is not equipped with the correct form of ilm, correct form of knowledge. Just the fact that we may be bare to our shaykh, we may attend the majlis, tafsir, hadith dars, or any other durus for that matter, or that we are active in the work of tabligh, does not mean that we have knowledge of how we are supposed to be practicing deen. A person needs to know what is ikhlas, what is sidq and ikhlas. Sidq is where a person carries out the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a manner that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants us to carry it out. The way an ibadat should be carried out, that is called sidq. Ikhlas means that whatever ibadat we do is solely for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Sidq and ikhlas are imperative both. Means that a person can have ikhlas, but not necessarily that there is sidq in it as well. If there is sidq, then there will be ikhlas. These are definitely, it is umum khusus mutlaq, a terminology of logic and mantiq. That if sidq is there, ikhlas will be found, but ikhlas is there, so necessarily sidq will be found. Sidq is that how to do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a manner that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And for that a person needs ilm. For that a person needs to have knowledge. Without knowledge a person won't know. For instance, a sahabi radiallahu ta'ala on one occasion came into the masjid and he performed salah. After performing salah, he came to greet Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he did salam to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, Salli fa innaka lam tusalli. Go back and read your salat again, as you have not read your salat. The Sahabi went, he read his sunan again, he read his salat. He came back to Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. Nabi sallam said to him, go, Salli fa innaka lam tusalli. Go and read salat as you have not performed salat. He repeated. Came back to Nabi Kareem sallallahu. 3 times he came to Nabi sallam. Nabi sallam told him, go and read your salat again. On the 4th occasion he came to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. He said to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, "O Nabi of Allah, explain to me what should I have done? What error, what mistake have I done?" To which what did Nabi Kareem sallallahu say to him? Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to him that, look, when you stand in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you read your salah, then stand in a manner wherein you are at ease. When you go in ruku, there is ease. When you come from ruku in the position of standing position, the qawma, there should be ease. And when you sit between the sujood, there should be ease. Meaning each posture should be done with itminan. Not that this Sahabi radiallahu read his salat in a wrong direction, or he read it without wuzu, or he omitted any of the farais of salat. He didn't omit any of these. He left an important aspect of salat, which is itminan. That a person should perform each posture with ease, comfortably, without rushing it. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam on that said to him, go back and repeat the salah as you have not read salat. Whereas his salat was done, he had done it, but Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said that he needed to perfect the manner in which he reads his salah because there were deficiencies in it. Now here this Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala, we cannot say that this Sahabi had no ikhlas. He had ikhlas. Which Sahabi would not have ikhlas? He surely had ikhlas in the salah that he was performing. But despite the ikhlas, the Nabi sallallahu ta'ala still said to him that go and repeat your salah. Because the quality of sidq wasn't there. That it was not performed in a manner that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants that it should be performed. With that perfection that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wanted from the Sahaba kiram radiyallahu ta'ala, that was not found. So Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam kept on telling him, repeat the salah. And one of the hikmah, the wisdom, why Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam kept on sending him that go and learn and come back, read it, repeat it and come back, was wanting him that the Sahabi himself should exert himself to perfection, and that if not, then he himself should ask Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that, O Nabi of Allah, as I am not aware, teach me. Teach me as to what mistake am I making, what errors am I making. And this Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala, how could he not have the quality of sidq as well? That is because he was probably new in Islam. And when a person initially comes in Islam, they're not going to know all the ahkam or have all the qualities that are there. This is something that gradually comes. This is something that a person will acquire with time. So this Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala probably didn't know this ruling, the importance of itminan in salat. So he was performing it without that. But Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam wanted that his salat and his external and internal salat should be in a manner that is liked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence he should have both qualities in him, that there needs to be ikhlas and sidq as well. This Sahabi radiallahu ta'ala, eventually when he then asked Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, what is it that I need to rectify? That's when Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam told him what his deficiency was, what rectification he had to make in his salat. Which indicates, which itself shows us what? Which shows the importance of ilm. The Sahabi had ikhlas, but the ilm was needed as well. Like nowadays we have many youth and youngsters who will come for salat, which is a very good thing. That they come for salat, they're reading their salat. And that too, they'll come in the masjid and they'll be performing their salat. But there is no ilm. Now they think to themselves that they're doing something good, which is performing salat, and that too in the masjid is a good deed, a good ibadat. But if there isn't ilm, and because there isn't ilm, their clothing is of such a state, and especially their pants, their trousers, their jeans. Like you will find people in the streets. Like you find people in the streets who want to show the world what type of underwear they're wearing. So because of the nature of their clothing, when they bend in ruku and when they go in sajda, then they are exposing themselves. And by doing so, their salat is invalid. Now, this individual may have ikhlas as well. Not that this person is performing salat to show somebody else. They're not performing salat for anybody else. There's no shirk there, there's no riyah there, there's no show, any of these things. Solely for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is ikhlas there. But because of lack of ilm, with regards to what is the awra, what is those parts of the body that need to be covered in salat, what is the ruling if those parts of the body become exposed, how much is allowed, what duration is allowed, what are the masail with regards to these things. A person is not aware and aware of these things. And because of that, a person is performing the salah but not realizing that the salat is not even valid. Because there's no ilm there. There's no ilm to with regards to how we're supposed to be performing our salat. Similarly, many people perform their salat sitting on the chair as well, which has become prevalent and it has become habitual as well. And there are many who have seen others reading salat on a chair and they think as well, the fine. Just the fact that we might have slight injury or some pains here and there, we can just put the chair and we can start reading salat on the chair and they'll be reading salat on the chair. Not realizing that their salat is invalid. Because it's not permissible, allowed for them to be performing salat on a chair under the conditions that they are choosing to perform salat on the chair. So there is no ilm there. And without ilm, a person will not know how to actually please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this isn't we're just talking about beginners, that we may think that look, we are on deen for a while now, we've been doing ibadat for a while now, and we've been coming to the Majlis, we are in the company of the mashayikh, so we are older in deen and that. No. We're not talking about beginners. That ilm is different nature. There are those who may think that they are on deen for many years now, but even they avoid of what the correct knowledge. And if we are also aware of various masail and we think that, okay, we are still aware of various day-to-day masail pertaining to our wuzu, taharat and ghusl and that. But then when it comes to the ilm and knowledge with regards to the kayfiyat, our inside condition, how we are within ourselves, we are totally void of those things. We are void of those things because we do not have knowledge of what is correct, what is wrong. When we disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what is our condition within us at that time? Do we have within as though that we may be doing the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and we may be coming in a Majlis program or doing the work of Dawah or Tabligh, or we may be doing humanitarian work, aid work and charity work, whatever it may be that we might be occupied in teaching also. But is that work of ours creating pride and arrogance within me? If there is even the knowledge of knowing what is pride, what is arrogance, what is show, what is ikhlas, how is ikhlas found, these things are those things such that we can only understand these things if we have knowledge of these. If you do not have ilm of these things, we are going to be unaware of this. And this knowledge, as I mentioned, you don't need to go to the Darul Uloom for it, but just by being in the company of the Ahlullah, by being in the company of the Mashayikh, of the Ahli Ilm, a person will be able to acquire this form of knowledge, which is very, very important for us. Hence, when Maulana Ilyas Rahmatullahi mentions the importance of ilm and zikr, it is very important. That the more ilm we have, the better we can carry out the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The more ilm we have, the more knowledge we have, the quicker we can draw close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because we know what are those things that please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We are aware of how we should be pleasing Allah ta'ala. We are aware of how to do the ibadat of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a manner that is pleasing to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And this is the reality. There are many who for many years are performing salat, but they are making such errors in their salat that they're not even aware that their salat is invalid. And for years they've been doing it and performing salat in such a manner. Or they are making such errors in their salat or in various ibadat, maybe taharat or wuzu also, or even with regards to fasting. But they don't even realize. They have no ilm at all that look, what we've been doing all along, it is something incorrect. Matters with regard to our aqidah beliefs, that the beliefs that we have, that these are those beliefs that are disliked by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Hence, ilm, very, very important that a person should have with them knowledge, acquire knowledge, and not just suffice on the azkar and wazifa that might be prescribed to one. Understand what is pride and arrogance as well. Because there are many who are involved in the work of Dawud al-Tabligh, those who are in the khanqa as well, who may be even a khadim of the sheikh, who may be teaching as well, who may be doing so many things, or just even the muezzin of the masjid, the imam of the masjid. But not realizing that we are suffering from what we have pride and arrogance within us. That any person that is new, we start looking down at that individual. We start looking down at that individual because we have pride and arrogance within us. And pride and arrogance, this is something that is so destructive. When a person commits disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there are two reasons why a person disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the consequences of it. One is due to shahwat, desire. One is out of desire. That a person has desire to commit haram, to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So the effect of shahwat is ghaflat. That when shahwat becomes rampant, and when that goes out of control, then it leads towards ghaflat. Ghaflat means neglect of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person becomes forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When there isn't shahwat, when there isn't that desire or temptation to disobey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at that time a person is in the remembrance of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, a person is calm. And in that state he'll remember Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he'll remember what is halal and haram, he'll know what is right and wrong. But then when the shahwat of his desire overpowers him, that's what draws him towards the disobedience of Allah ta'ala. And when he disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he doesn't think of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He becomes neglectful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. He becomes forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If he was to remember Allah ta'ala at that time, then he wouldn't be committing that sin. So he becomes forgetful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala whilst he commits that sin. And the other is that a person disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala not just because of that ghaflat, but out of baghawat. Person disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of rebellion. Out of rebellion. Just the way Iblis, he rebelled. His sin was rebellion. And rebellion, this comes about from what? From pride and arrogance. What Iblis had in him, what his sin was that he had pride and arrogance in him. He had takabbur in him, pride. That when he saw the mold of Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam, and the fact that Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam was made from clay and he was made from fire, so that arrogance within him, pride within him, that look, I am better than Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. So why did Allah have to create Sayyidina Adam for? So I am better. And then when Shaitan was expelled, and at that time, what did Shaitan, when he was told of his wrong, Shaitan didn't just accept that it is right, I've made an error here. Make tawbah, turn to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that I made a mistake here, so forgive me. But instead he justified his wrong. He started to justify his wrong. That no, at the end I am better than Adam because I am created from fire and he is created from clay. So on that basis I have superiority over Adam, so why should I prostrate to Adam for? So Shaitan did what? He also disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Disobeyed the person who, because of the desire, commits zina. Because of the desire to gamble, they gamble. The desire to drink haram, to drink alcohol, they drink. Here Shaitan, he disobeyed Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala by not following the command of Allah ta'ala to do what? To prostrate to Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. And in not wanting to follow that command, Shaitan then started proving why. This is all the sign of what? Rebellion. That he rebelled there. And it was his pride and arrogance. And in doing so, he tried to justify that, look, I have a justification for why I am not prostrating to Sayyidina Adam alayhi salatu wasalam. It is these two things that lead towards a person disobeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But even that person who disobeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala out of ghaflat and shahwat, that person will still get the tawfiq of tawbah. When that desire now calms down, that person will still return to Allah Ta'ala and will still make tawbah. The person who drinks, for example, had the desire to drink. When they had a desire to drink, they drank. After that, then they realize that, look, I made a mistake. Now what happens? They don't want to even look at the bottle. They'll throw the bottle away. They'll become disgusted with what they have done. They'll make tawbah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They'll feel ashamed of the wrong that they have done. Why? Because at that time, when that shahwat was rampant and overpowered their senses, they became neglectful of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. They forgot Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But now when they have calmed down from it, realize, now they'll still make tawbah. So such a person will still make tawbah at least. They make tawbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will forgive them. But here the person who has what in him, the person that has ghurur, who has takabbur, pride and arrogance, will try and justify it. They will try and justify it. That no, there was no chance, the bottle was in front of me. I was forced and I was tempted and I was this and that, so I couldn't help it. It wasn't my fault, or fula, these and that. They will try and justify carrying out the disobedience, due to which such a person does not make tawbah. A haughty person, one who has pride and arrogance, is deprived of making tawbah. They do not make tawbah at all because of their pride and arrogance. In making tawbah, a person needs to humiliate themselves, a person lowers themselves, a person shows the remorse and guilt to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You will cry in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, whereas that person who has pride and arrogance, they're not going to lower themselves. And when they don't lower themselves, never mind in people, they won't even lower themselves in front of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And a person who may be practicing deen, that thinks that they are practicing deen, also suffers from pride and arrogance. Also suffers from pride and arrogance. Just so, which is something that we all suffer from. But do we actually have the ilm? Do we have the knowledge to understand that, look, this is pride and arrogance? At this moment, the quality, or you can say the trait, and the bad trait of pride is rampant within me, is overpowering me, and I do not have humility within me. The times wherein we may act as if we have humility in us, but in actual fact it is pride and arrogance. How are we going to realize these things? Do we even have knowledge of these type of things? For that we need to have knowledge of these things. We need to learn these things from being in the company of the righteous. There might be things that are good, but in actual fact they are not. There might be certain things that we may think that no, these are bad for us, but they may not be bad for us. One murid of Hazrat Hakim Umar Rahmatullahi, one person, he wrote to Hazrat Hakim Umar Rahmatullahi, and he would say that when I do sajda, I see the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When I do sajda, I see the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now if it's somebody else, they will say, wow, check this out. Look at his sajda, look at his condition. When he does sajda, he sees the nur of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And such a person themselves would think that, look, I'm actually seeing such nur and such light. And if that is the case, then for sure, I must be a great wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I may be really righteous and pious also. And that will lead towards what? Pride and arrogance. We then may ask our fellow colleagues or friends or musallis, do you have this kafiyat? Do you feel like this or not? Do you perceive such or not? And they will say, no, we don't at all. No. We lucky if you remember whether it's the first sajda or the second sajda. So no, we don't feel that at all. So again he thinks that, look, there's something here. I'm now a bit exclusive here. I'm a bit different here. And that leads to what? The pride and arrogance now. That leads to what? The pride and arrogance. Look, there's something in me. You ask your friend and then, do you read the tahajjud? No, I don't need to read it. No, you read the tahajjud. So I'm reading the tahajjud, so there's something within me. Are you doing this nafal or that nafal? No. Then I'm doing this nafal acts and there is something within me. I'm reading X amount of Quran. How much are you reading? Very little, so and so. So I'm reading much more than you. A lot of these things that lead towards pride and arrogance. And we don't even realize that this pride and arrogance isn't destroying whatever good that we're doing by means of this ibadat. And that person who we think is doing very little, but the little that they are doing is actually being placed there and will be put on the scales of good deeds. It will be there. And they will benefit from it, they will see the fruits of it. And we may be doing so much, but because of our pride and arrogance, on the day of Qiyamah, it won't have any weight to it at all. There will be nothing at all. But we don't even realize these things. We didn't even have that knowledge to understand that, look, what we are doing is right or wrong or not. Sayyidina Hanzala radiallahu ta'ala, whose condition was such that when he was on his own at home on occasion, then he started pondering, thinking to himself. And then he got disturbed, perturbed. What? Why is it that when we are in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, it seems to us that Jannat and Jahannam is in front of us. That is our kayfiyat, that we are seeing Jannat and Jahannam in front of us. There is our Iman is at a high, it is elated. And then when we are at home with our family members, the same kayfiyat, the same condition is not there. So he thought to himself that if that is the case, then if I am different when I am by Nabi sallallahu ta'ala sallam, and when I find myself different when I am in seclusion at home alone, and if there is a difference in this manner, then it means that there is some nifaq within me. That means I am a hypocrite. So he left his house. He went out and he started saying what? Nafaqa Hanzala, that Hanzala has become a munafiq, Hanzala has become a munafiq. And in that process he meets up with Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala an. Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala asks, boy, what's this, what's happening here? He says, look, this is what my condition is. And there's a big difference here. So I feel that I have become a munafiq. So Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, he became worried as well. This is what you are explaining, this is something that I feel the same as well. I also feel the same. That when in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, our condition is different. And when we then in seclusion, when we are away from there, our condition is different. So both of them became greatly disturbed by this. So what did they do? They didn't come to their own conclusion that what do you think it is? Now at that time, those days, they didn't have Google anyway. But that is what we would probably do. Anything for that matter, we would just make a search on it. That this type of condition, what does it mean? This type of condition, what does it mean? For our ruhani condition, we don't make searches. Yes, for maybe medical and health things, we'll do such a search. And that is actually mental. For example, severe headache, dizziness. Dizziness and headache is something that is sort of universal with many illnesses. With many illnesses. Now somebody is going through a phase wherein they feel a bit of dizziness or so. Now they're getting worried that why do I feel dizzy? Stand up in salat and I'm dizzy, I feel that I'm going to fall any time. Stand up and I'm walking, I feel dizzy. So now a person gets worried, so they start putting in dizziness or whatever in there. And then what comes in the top 10 list, you have, top of the list you have cancer. Cancer, and then you go on, and then there will be lack of iron maybe. Lack of iron, lack of vitamin D nowadays. Everybody's on a bandwagon of vitamin D, which you should do, right? So lack of iron or something else. So it could be so many reasons there. So many reasons. But now you will find cancer there as well maybe. So a person this is cancer. And now what happens is, his dizziness increases. His dizziness increases now. He's become fully dizzy now. Maybe I've got cancer. And then what happens is he goes into cancer. Looks at the other symptoms of cancer. And in those symptoms of cancer along with dizziness, he might find a few other symptoms as well, which are similar to what he might be experiencing, and thus he's got yaqeen, now I've got cancer. He's got yaqeen now that I've got cancer. And what happens is that he had it here, maybe not a couple of years ago, somebody's case of a female, no cancer at all. No cancer at all. But just doing searches in that. Mentally a person thinks that they've got cancer. Mentally a person thinks that they've got cancer. And this is the same with so many issues, that you're not suffering from something. But you just start assuming such that you got something. You have no saya on you. You have no sihr on you. There is no jinnat following you. But just the fact that maybe on a certain occasion, you may have heard something. That you were walking and it was a little windy and there were some leaves rattling somewhere. But you just have that yaqeen that was something was following me. And the fact that you turned down and didn't see anybody at all, so it's a case of somebody was following me, but the fact that I didn't see anything or anyone, then it was something. It wasn't someone, it was something. And then just the fact that we walk in somewhere and between two walls and we just walk past and we just glance our shadow or something onto the wall or so. That's it. I saw something there. I saw something there. Middle of the night, whilst we groggy, our eyes open, it goes where? It goes towards the mirror. And when we look in the mirror, we say, definitely I saw somebody standing there. Definitely somebody standing there. Not realizing that our clothes are hung directly across the mirror. So it is a reflection of our clothing, which are hanged our jabba or cloak or something, or a black big coat or so. The reflection of that is on the mirror. We see that and we go yaqeen now that look, there's a jinnat following me. And then our head spins again, it's a jinnat. Not feeling well today, it is the jinnat. Yeah, there are those who jinnats do trouble as well. There's no denial of that. But there will be occasions wherein we are now assuming these type of things. And when a person becomes and is a bit afraid, then that's it. They have yaqeen now that there's definitely somebody's in the house, somebody's walking in the house, something's happening in the house, this and that, because of when you're frightened. And when you're not frightened, then you don't feel any of these things. These type of noises that occur, everything will happen, and you know at that time you know what it is. But when you're afraid, you can't make sense of it. So this is detrimental. Don't go start searching in such a manner. Because you may not have cancer, you think you got cancer. Or it might be a case of you do have cancer, and you think, no, it's just lack of iron. It is just lack of iron, so it's fine, nothing to worry about. No need to go to the doctors. No need to go to the doctors, a bit over, you'll die and then you'll get an appointment, diagnosis that you had cancer. Hafiza say, और कोई एजेंट होगा तो उसको टर्मिनल कह देंगे ना. He's still about to live, but because they don't want to do his treatment and that's save money and don't do his treatment, but he's got his terminal. ऐसा भी होता है. So ऐसा भी होता है, ऐसे तजुर्बे वाले भी है. Just because they don't want to do the treatment, but think about it, the person is terminal. Whereas, no terminal, no cancer, nothing at all. Okay, they get terminal there. Khair wa hal. Sayyidina Hanzala radiallahu ta'ala, Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala, they didn't just come to their own conclusion. That's it, we have munafiq and we have nifaq, stop going to the masjid. Sit in one corner and just start crying there. But the first thing they do is what? They go straight to Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. And they go to Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam clarifies, gives them knowledge. Clarifies about their condition. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, Allah ta'ala given him so much hikmah, that all the world's philosophers, whatever works they have done, their philosophy, put all that together on one scale and just place one hadith in comparison of that, and the hadith will outweigh the philosophy. Meaning that the wisdom, we talk about the wisdom of the ta'aleem, the philosophy of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam is so unique. Each hadith. And when we teach hadith as well, we realize you teach hadith. And when you are doing the muta'ala of that hadith, preparing that hadith, looking at that hadith, sometimes you just stop for moments just marveling the hadith. It may be a case that a person becomes so used to some hadith that you may not contemplate over it. But when you do, and there will be times wherein you read a hadith, you teach a hadith, teach it 100 times and 100 lessons come in front of you. Teach it 100 times and 100 new wisdoms come in front, 100 new reasons and understanding of that hadith comes in front of you. And then when a person in their practical life carries out those hadiths or analyzes those hadiths with a person's practical life, and especially when a person knows hadith or has a bit of ilm of hadith, in our own practical lives or in the lives of others, step by step, every time you'll be reminded of this hadith and you understand, look, this was the hadith of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That this is exactly what the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam mentioned. This is exactly what wrong we are doing. This is exactly how against it we are going. or this is exactly how we benefited from the hadith of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So many times medics will say something, or a person in general will mention something, praising that, look, we are benefiting of something, this manner and so. We're seeing this barakat, or we're seeing this benefit of something. And then immediately will come in your mind that is the hadith of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But a person practicing it may not even know that there is a hadith indicating towards such. Won't even know there is a hadith. But because they're practicing that hadith, they're seeing the benefits of that hadith. They're doing and carrying out something in a manner which is beneficial for them, but that is a similar manner to what Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam has taught us. So we don't even realize that, look, this is what Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam mentioned. But if you are aware of the hadith, then you'll see every step of our lives how important the ta'aleem of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is, how it safeguards a person as well, how it benefits an individual. Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to Sayyidina Abu Bakr and Sayyidina Anzila radiallahu ta'ala, said to them that, look, if your condition was to remain all the time, when you're in my condition, when you're in my company, the manner in which your iman is and your condition, if that kayfiyat was to remain with you all the time, then you will become such that the angels would do salam with you whilst you're sleeping in your beds as well. Whilst you're walking in the streets, the angels will do salam with you. But Ya Hazrat, sa'atan fa sa'atan. Nabi sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to Sayyidina Hazrat Allahu ta'ala that no, this kayfiyat, this condition is something that is what? Sa'atan fa sa'atan, it comes and it goes, it comes and it goes. That you cannot maintain such type of level all the time. You will not be able to maintain that level all the time. And for sure, when they're going to be in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, there's nothing can match. Just moments being in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, and that kayfiyat of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, being in the company of those who just came for just a few moments, their lives were totally transformed. The Mujaddid al-Fisani rahimahullah ta'ala mentions that if just an iota, meaning, and he gives the example that the eye of a needle, if just that amount of nur from Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was to be emitted to the world, not a single person would remain without iman. Every non-believer would become a believer if just that amount of nur from the heart of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam was to be exposed. That was the kayfiyat of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So who wouldn't benefit by being in a company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu alayhi wa sallam? This was the condition of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala. Sayyidina Abdullah bin Mubarak radiallahu rahimahullah was asked once that whose maqam, whose martaba, whose status is more? Umar bin Abdul Aziz or Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala. And Umar bin Abdul Aziz, who was known as who? As the fifth Khalifa of Islam, as the Khulafa Rashidin, the golden era, such a just ruler of the time. That when Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, such a just ruler, great wali of Allah subhanahu on the tarz, and an example of the Khulafa Rashidin, the golden era of Islam, and how just Umar bin Abdul Aziz, rahimahullah, was, that the occasion when he passed away, a shepherd would be with his herds on the mountains. He once came by a village, and when he came by a village, he came and he started telling the people that Umar bin Abdul Aziz has passed away. Umar bin Abdul Aziz has passed away. So they said to him, how do you know? How do you know? You're on your own on the mountains. So there's no reception there that you could have received any messages there. Any WhatsApp, fake messages. So-and-so has passed away, so-and-so has passed away. So there's no reception there. How would you have known that he's passed away? Is it impossible? He said, no, he's passed away, he's passed away. They said, okay, we don't believe you until we get news directly from the city. In those days, it wasn't a case of the messages would just reach throughout the world anytime. They had to wait for travelers coming from the city, and when people from the city would come, they would then pass on news to them, they would give them news. And then they passed on news that yes, it is true, Umar bin Abdul Aziz has passed away. So they asked and called the shepherd, but tell us, how did you get the news? You didn't go to the city, you were in the hills the whole time, in the mountains, how did you get the news? To which he said what? This morning when I woke up, I noticed that a wolf had attacked the sheep. A wolf had attacked the sheep. And until now, that wasn't the case. The wolves and the sheep would graze together. Nobody would be in any harm whatsoever. This morning I awaken and I see that the sheep have been attacked, to which I realized and I knew that the upholder of justice is no longer. That whilst he existed and he was alive, there was justice and there was tranquility and there was peace within animals as well. Not human beings, animals as well. Meaning these are those who rule the hearts of animals as well, whose existence had an effect on animals as well. And now that he does not exist, this was a sign that he does not exist. So somebody asked Abdullah bin Mubarak rahimahullah, whose maqam, whose martaba state is his mom? Umar bin Abdul Aziz or Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala? To which he said that never mind Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala. Even that horse that Sayyidina Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala would mount on, which he went in the expeditions with Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. That dust and the sand that would fly from the hooves of the horse and would sit on the nose of the horse. Even that dust, the maqam and the status of that dust is greater than that of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Never mind comparing Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala to Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Even the speck of dust that flew in the path of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala of the horse of Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala, even the status of that is greater than that of Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Why? Because Umar bin Abdul Aziz, whoever he was, but he didn't even spend a moment in the Sahbat of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. His eyes did not see Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. He did not physically spend any moments in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam, and he is a Sahabi Rasul who has spent time in the company of Nabi Kareem sallallahu ta'ala sallam. There's going to be a big difference. And just imagine such a big difference. That there are those individuals who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, they have such qurb with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That those who come in their company also perceive the qurb of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from distance. When people would go to Hazrat Raipuri rahmatullahi, miles away from Raipur, where there is a bridge that enters, before you enter into Raipur, people already from that distance would be able to feel the nur of Hazrat Raipuri rahmatullahi. Already a tranquility would descend upon them. As Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam one occasion with the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala faced towards Yemen. And Nabi Kareem sallallahu alaihi wasallam said what? That I can perceive the smell of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Yemen. Referring to Sayyidina Uwais Qarni rahimahullah. That I can perceive the fragrance of the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from Yemen. So there are those who are of that caliber, who have such closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such a great maqam that they have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So people will benefit so much from being in their company, and there have been such great awliya of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, such great connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Bishr bin Haris rahimahullah, a great wali of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he became ill. When he became ill, then Ahmad ibn Hanbal rahimahullah was also there to meet him, to see him. At that time there was another very pious woman by the name of Amina Ramaliya. She was Ramla Ramaliya. Very, very pious woman. So she also came in Parda to meet Bishr bin Haris rahimahullah. When she was there, Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal rahimahullah said to Bishr bin Haris that look, she's come to me to request her to make dua for me. To make dua for me as well. So he requested her to make dua for them both. So she raised her hands and she asked Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, they've requested for dua, Allah, forgive them both and save them from the fire of Jahannam. Save them from the fire of Jahannam. Sayyidina Ahmad ibn Hanbal mentioned that night he saw a dream. And in that dream he sees that from his roof a paper is sent from the roof, comes through the roof, which says to him that you have been forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That you have been forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala means this is the nature of some people's dua as well, of how much ta'alluq that they have with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One believe Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala was doing tawaf of the Baytullah. He made such a tawbah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that a piece of paper flew from the Baytullah into his hands, and on it was written that he has been forgiven by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And the writing was such that no matter which direction he would turn it in, the Shara Mishkat, this waqi as we mentioned it, No matter which side, which way, direction he would turn the paper in, the writing would be seen in any direction. Because Allah Ta'ala is free from any direction. This was maghfirah directly that came from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, there are such individuals that are who have existed as well. Sheikh Abdul Aziz al-Dabbagh rahimahullah, who was an ummi, he was illiterate. He could not read the Quran or the Hadith, he was illiterate. But his condition was such that if anybody recited the Quran, he would say to them that this is the ayat of the Quran. If somebody was to recite the Hadith, and he would say this is the Hadith. If somebody would just quote any person else, he would say this is just somebody else's quotation, this is nothing at all. He would say this is Hadith al-Qudsi, this is a normal Hadith. Irrelevant, meaning he didn't know, he did not read the Hadith or the Quran. For instance, if I was to read a Hadith, and if I was to read it with a bit of a tune, and do a bit of mud and gunna with it, those who are non-huffaz will probably assume that, look, I'm reciting the Quran. Reciting the Quran. Or similarly some other poetry as well. If you recite that in the form of, with a bit of tajweed, then a person may assume that, look, this is the Quran. How would you know? A person would not know. Hadith as well, if I just read the Hadith, you might think, is this Hadith or is this verse of the Quran? We would not know. Whether it is, if it's not said, this is a Hadith, we would not know. And he was one that whenever anybody would recite, then he would say himself, look, this is the Hadith. This is the Hadith of Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, this is the verse of the Quran. And a person asks him, Hazrat, you are ummi, you are illiterate. How do you know? How are you aware that this is the Hadith and this is not the Hadith? This is the Quran and not. To which he says, whenever I hear it, there's a separate, different noor to the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, different nature of noor to the words of Nabi Karim sallallahu ta'ala sallam, and any other person's kalam is void of any noor. It is void of any noor. He could perceive the different noor that came from the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala from the hadith, whereas he could not read it himself. That's what type of the caliber, the nature that they were. So if there are such people, and his one waqi, his students once asked him, that shows, explain to us the walking of Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, demonstrate to us how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked. He said, okay, not on this occasion, another occasion. And he asked Allah Ta'ala that Allah show me. He wanted to see. In his dream, he had seen Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam and how Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam walked. The following morning, he told his students, everybody come to the open fields, go to the jungle, the open fields, not in the normal places, open fields. And there he demonstrated to him, to the people who were there, how Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam would walk. He just took a few steps, and those who were around could not take it, they fell unconscious. They fell unconscious. But from what they fell unconscious? They fell unconscious just from the noor in that example of the walking of Nabi Karim sallallahu alaihi wasallam, because that walking was attached to Nabi sallallahu alaihi wasallam. There was so much noor in it that they fell unconscious. This is why, this is the kayfiyat of the heart, my dear friend. We may think that we're hearing hadith directly, and how come we don't fall unconscious? Isn't it? Because there is no noor. The one who's speaking, there is no noor. The one who's listening, there is no noor. There is no noor whatsoever. That's the reason why. There is no asr. There is no effect on our hearts either, because our hearts are so blackened. And if our hearts were not blackened, then the effect of that, we would have perceived that if the effect of it. It would have an effect on us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions that with regards to the Quran as well. The Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala and the Ahlullah, those who, when the Quran is, he said, wajilat qulubuhum, and the hearts tremble to the Quran. We hear the day and night the Quran doesn't affect us the least bit. It has no asr upon us. And there are those who has so much asr effect on them because of the kayfiyat of the heart. It all depends on what? It depends on the kayfiyat of the heart. Just we have Sayyidina Hanzala radiallahu ta'ala mentioned with regards to their kayfiyat, their condition as well. And an example of this is, look, the sea. There will be times wherein the sea is calm, there is no waves. When there is no waves and no storm, the water is settled. When the water is so settled, you'll think that there is not much water in the sea. And when there is storms and there is waves, then you think that there's so much water, you see so much density of water. And when there is settled, you don't see anything. This is the same. The iman of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala was always at that level. But when they were in the company of Nabi Karim sallallahu ta'ala sallam, at that time the storms of iman were set off. So they would feel the density of that the iman is so much. And then when they would be on their own in seclusion, it would be calm. And because it would be calm at that time, to them it would think that, look, there isn't much iman. But the water is the same in the sea. It doesn't increase or decrease. The water level is the same. It's just that when it's calm, it may seem that it is less. When there's storms, it may seem that it is increased, but the water level is the same. So the Sahaba Kiram radiallahu ta'ala, so when they were such Ahlullah, there was so much effect here. And these people were affected by what? Just the walk of Nabi Karim Sallallahu, because there was that nur of Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam that was attached to it. That was just attached to it. So just imagine if we attach ourselves as well to Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, to the Sunnah of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, how much nur would be enveloped, we would be enveloped in, just externally from the Sunnahs of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. तेरे महबूब की यारब में शबाहत लेके आया हूँ, हकीकत उसे तू करदे में सूरत लेके आया हूँ. Just the external, just the way Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu salam, when he had the competition with who, the challenge with all the champion and all the master sorcerers at the time. And what the result of that was what? That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala granted them all iman. They tried, but Sayyidina Musa alayhi salatu salam, the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, did what was commanded to him. All of those sahirin who came to challenge Musa alayhi salatu salam, who came in the ring with that intention, left with iman. And the reason given is that when they came, they were told deliberately that, look, you're there to challenge Musa alayhi salatu salam. So when you come deliberately, dress like Musa alayhi salatu salam, in order to ridicule him. In order to ridicule him, dress like Musa alayhi salatu salam. So they all came dressed like Musa alayhi salatu salam. But that dressing of theirs, the Mufassirin mentioned, that the dressing of theirs was so beloved by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah ta'ala made that a means of them coming in the fold of Islam. That they hidayah came just because of that reason. Hazrat Hakim Rahmatullah mentioned that a person was walking past somewhere and a lady, total stranger, called him inside and welcomed him and gave him a good meal and everything, treated him well. And this person asked, but for what reason, why all this? And when she was asked, he said, what? That I had lost my son. I had lost my son. And this is a person, he looks just like my son. He looks just like my son. So this is because he looked like her son, she welcomed him and she treated him in such a manner, just because he looked like her son. So a person in this world who will treat somebody else in such a manner just because they look like their beloved, will Allah Ta'ala not treat His servants due to them emulating their beloved as well? तो यही तेरे महबूब की यारब में शबाहत लेके आया हूँ. That just because of the shabahat that was there, that Allah Ta'ala liked that so much. So here too, that just that walk, because there was that similarity with that of Nabi Karim Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, had such an effect on the people that they fell unconscious. Barhal, as I mentioned to you here, with regards to ilm, the importance of knowledge, of knowing, look, what is pride and arrogance, what is ikhlas, what is show, what are these things. A person needs to have knowledge of these things. And how Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam explains to exclusively and clearly to Sayyidina Abu Bakr Siddiq, Sayyidina Hamza radiallahu ta'ala. So if we want as well, and this ilm, correct ilm of deen will come where? By being in a company of the righteous. Finish how even an ignorant person, a villager, or ignorant person, someone who doesn't have ilm, knowledge, or hasn't been in such an environment of understanding, and even that person can change so much. Just means that there is so much barakat in the ilm. Even they can then acquire so much understanding of deen. That one dihati, he took bayat to Hazrat Mawlana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullah Ali. And as you do, when you take bayat, you do tawbah. Tawbah karta hu main kufr se, shirk se, bid'at se. I do kufr from this, I do tawbah from this sin, and this sin. So he said, he read the words in that. After that, this dehati is a village after all. He said to us, Hazrat, you mentioned all the things, but you didn't mention drugs. Charas, ganja. You didn't mention drugs there. So, I said, why? Are you in that habit as well? Are you in that habit as well? Do you smoke some cannabis? He said, yes, I do. So Hazrat Mana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullahi said to him, fine, start reducing it. Start reducing it. To which he said, Hazrat, first of all, tell me, is it jaiz or na jaiz? Is it something that is jaiz or na jaiz? So Hazrat Mana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullahi said to him, it is na jaiz, not permissible. So he said to Hazrat, if it is na jaiz, not permissible, then how can I reduce it? Then it's not a case of reducing, then it's just a case of what? Totally leaving it. And when I made tawbah from other sins, I made tawbah from this as well. Because those other sins were different, this was addiction. So I made tawbah from this. And then he went away. After a while he came and he gave Hazrat Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullahi some hadiyah. He gave him a gift. Hazrat Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullahi asked me, for what reason hadiyah, why has this come from, for what reason? Because these are those who are not expecting that whoever comes and brings hadiyah. They are those who, if you want something, you have to bring something. There's other places you go, you have to bring something, you bring, you'll get something. So you have to take things. Here it wasn't that case, but you come empty-handed, you'll go with so much. But come with khalas and you'll go back with so much. So he said to me, which he said, that when I stopped the smoking, for example, or the abusing, the substance, so I decided to myself that look, I'll save that money. And then when I kept a bit of the money, then again the nafs was there all the time. Look, you've got this extra money, you've got extra money, you can get a good batch now. There's a good amount in that. So for that day I made the intention that whatever I save from it, I'm going to come and give that as hadiyah to you. So I'm keeping it, I'm going to give it as hadiyah to you, so that the nafs does not become so enticed towards it or desire for it. So through you I'm saving the money from it, I'll come and give it to you as well. So this was a village, a total dihati as you would say. No understanding normal, but look how much understanding just from that one bayat with Hazrat Maulana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi Rahmatullahi. Allah Ta'ala granted him so much understanding of deen and that, so much understanding Allah Ta'ala given him, that where his aql took him and what stage he became this. So even a person who of that nature, that's why being in a company of the correct people, how their understanding of deen can also increase. Allah Ta'ala grant us all the understanding. ربنا تقبل منا إنك أنت السميع العليم وتب علينا إنك أنت التواب الرحيم